that we're ready to go live. I can't see. Yep. Brilliant. Well, welcome everybody to the launch of our new toolkit. We're so excited you could all join us. To those of you here in the Lillian Bayliss studio at Sadler's Wells, and to all of you who are joining us online via live stream. My name is Kate Danielson. I'm the director of the Weston Jerwood Creative Bursaries program. I'm a white, middle-aged woman with short, light brown hair, and I'm wearing a black jacket. We're here to celebrate the new toolkit with all the people who have helped to make it happen. We've got a packed agenda this morning, and once we get started, we're going to roll straight through about 2 hours till about 11:30. If you haven't already, please access the toolkit web pages through the QR code, which is on the back of the toolkit, or it's on our website, and it's also in the YouTube description. So we're starting with some welcome thoughts from Lily Geisendorfer and from Alistair Spalding, before moving into 2 sessions about the programme and the toolkit. And then we're going to zoom out with a couple of our guest speakers, Professor Dave O'Brien, Baroness Deborah Bull, and Hilary Carty. Then we're going to get into some sort of knotty questions about how, as a real organisation, working with real people, you go beyond the talk to make people feel welcome and to make change happen. Our panel of host organisations will include a Q&A as well. Finally, we'll hear about the workshop programme, which we are launching today before wrapping up. Oh, I didn't go on to the next one. There we go. Unfortunately, Lily has COVID today, which is really sad for her and for us, but she's going to join us on live Zoom this morning. Can I pass over?
Good morning, everyone. Hello. Thank you, Kate. Welcome to this launch of Teamwork in Practice, collective insights, ideas and challenges to drive socio-economic inclusivity in your organisation. I'm Lily Geisendorfer. I'm Director of Jerwood Arts. I'm a white woman in my 40s wearing a blue jumper. And I've been involved with Weston Jerwood Creative Bursaries for 5 years now. I'm properly devastated not to be in the room today, but as Kate says, I've got COVID, and I know everyone in the room will have missed a preview, a press night, a launch due to this insidious virus over the last 3 years. It's no fun, but on we go. So a very warm welcome to everyone at the Lillian Bayliss and everyone on the live stream. We've had an amazing response to this launch. Thank you all so much for making time for this morning. So Jerwood Arts is the leading independent funder dedicated to supporting extraordinary early career artists, makers and curators, producers, to develop and thrive across the UK. We're committed to supporting artistic freedom of expression and being as inclusive as possible across all our work. How do we do this? Sometimes we design, sometimes we support, and sometimes we deliver imaginative awards, fellowships, residencies, programs, commissions, and bursaries. And over 12 years, Weston Jerwood Creative Bursaries has become ever more central to how we deliver on our values of listening to early career artists' needs and listening to the sector. I want to give an early thank you today to our trustees for their commitment in consistently supporting this programme and enabling it in turn to respond to our ever-changing context. So, practice makes not perfect progress. Take a beat. If you want to close your eyes for just a second. What does that mean to you? For us, it's become a rallying cry as we've navigated the pandemic, embraced uncertainty, and understood injustice in new ways over recent years. To me, It means remembering there's no such thing as perfect, just as there's no such thing as failure. As the playwright Samuel Beckett said, fail again, fail better. Practice makes progress. So we're asking people to commit to long-term learning for long-term change. Practice makes progress means we're never going to be done with inclusivity, but I think that's to our advantage. I find the concept of thinking of myself as a future ancestor quite useful here. To think about my behaviour, my choices today, from the perspective of their impact on future generations. It motivates me to be brave, to keep up to date with new ideas, and to try and do the next right thing. And I find it slightly terrifying, which adds a dose of urgency. The suggestions in the toolkit arise directly from fellows and alumni of the Weston Jerwood Creative Bursaries programme. It's their words, their expertise, and you'll hear from them in a moment. The toolkit responds entirely to this gap, if you like, in the market, where their voices should be. It's a resource that articulates in honest detail what inclusivity does and doesn't look like, up close, day to day, just working in an arts organisation. The suggested actions in the toolkit are also full of tension, contradictions even. There's no groupthink here. There's no best practice, one size fits all. Instead, we hope it opens up a space for conversations about what fairness, equality, and equity really look like in the workplace. Timing's an unpredictable thing. Art Fund, one of our partners, recently published a report into the lack of diversity in curatorial roles called It's About Handing Over Power. And CBAN, the Contemporary Visual Arts Network, are publishing a series of call to action toolkits towards equity and inclusion at the moment. To me, these all feel connected to a central challenge for our sector. How can we improve ways of working that currently don't work for everyone? So in a moment, you're going to hear from two people without whom none of this would have been possible. My thanks to Kate Danielson, Director of Weston Jerwood Creative Bursaries since 2010, and Melissa Wong, our Toolkit Project Manager. They've worked brilliantly for almost a year now on creating what for a long time we called our anti-toolkit, a name that captured a vision for it to be anything but a traditional toolkit. But first, it's my great pleasure to hand you back to the Lillian Baylis studio and ask you to put your hands together to give a very warm welcome to Sir Alistair Spalding, Chief Executive and Artistic Director of Sadler's Wells.
Thank you very much, Lily. And I'm really sorry you're not well. We were at the same event last week in the Queen Elizabeth Hall. I'm sure that's where we all got it. Welcome to Sadler's Wells. I'm an elder man, white man, with glasses, a white shirt and a jacket. Many times in my life, I found myself approaching a building or institution, a school, a court building, a corporate office, and I had that feeling of dread and fear that you were entering a place that was strange, unfriendly, and definitely not for you. That includes buildings like this one. And some of you may have had that feeling as you walk through our stage door entrance today. Sometimes, as with corporate offices, for example, you're meant to have that feeling. They're meant to be intimidating spaces. It's a method of control. But should entering a theatre make you feel like that? This is just the first hurdle that many people have to jump before they can enter the world of arts and culture. There are many more to come. The language you have to learn. First, the technical terms that are used in theatre, front of house, box office, stage left, stage right, but also often the funding-related language, which is particular to our sector. I've eventually managed to learn this, but unlike learning French or Latin, there was no way of learning it unless you were already in the club. So the only way that you can start to learn the right codes and language is to be on the inside and to be part of that club. Our aim at Sadler's Wells is to break down some of these barriers for the audience, but also for the workforce and artists that we want to invite in. But it often remains an aim, good intentions are not enough. That's why these bursaries are so important. They're a way of ensuring that anyone can at least have an entry point into this world, which is through a supported and focused process. We sometimes, when the current systems don't lead to equal access, have to put steps in to make a change, and these bursaries are a fantastic example of this. And why is this important? Because inclusion is about justice and equality, but it's also important in ensuring that the work that is made on our stage is made from a cross-section of our society, so that they can then speak to the same cross-section of the audience. We launched a season last year called Well Seasoned, which put a focus on the work we're doing to support black artists and artists of colour. Kwame Asafo-Adjei, Julia Cheng, Dixon MBI, Ivan Blackstock were among them. Young choreographers bringing their experience and stories to our stage. They're all examples of artists who, through some good luck or meeting the right people at the right time, have made it through. But I know that we cannot leave this to chance, and we have to create chances and opportunities for the next generation. We're opening a new theatre in Stratford in the spring of next year, hopefully, called Sadler's Wells East, with a 600-seat theatre and 6 lovely studios, designed to provide space to empower and inspire. It will be the home for the UK's first hip-hop theatre academy, a choreographic school, and we will continue to support new choreographers there and an exciting new facility. It also has a lovely and large foyer space with cafes and bars and a performance space. Sadler's Wells East has been a chance for us to try and create a space from scratch that is visibly inclusive and welcoming to artists and audience alike, and new artists and new audiences alike. It's opening a new door. I want to finish by congratulating Jerwood Arts and everyone involved in making these bursaries possible. It's because of opportunities like this that positive change can happen, and I have no doubt every one of those people you have gifted possibility to, they will bring something unique and wonderful. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you so much, Alistair. That was a really wonderful introduction. Thank you. And brings me nicely on to my next bit, which is I wanted to give a little bit of background about the Weston Jerwood Creative Bursaries. In 2010, Jerwood Arts was invited by the Department for Culture, Media and Sport to create a programme that would open up jobs in the arts to those who couldn't afford to do an unpaid internship, which, as I'm sure a lot of you know, was incredibly prevalent at that time. It was the way people got into the arts. This pilot version of the programme, which was called DCMS, Jerwood Creative Bursaries, was created by me and the then director of Jerwood Arts, Shona Manson, taking our lead from our funders at DCMS and Arts Council England. It was a really important step which was taken by the outgoing Labour government at that time, Margaret Hodge, when class inequalities were not part of mainstream discussion in the arts. And it was a really exciting time because we were given a free rein to shine a light on these inequalities while also providing a leg up for a cohort of 44 fellows. We had no idea at that time how important the programme would become. This fundamental mission hasn't changed, supporting emerging early career creatives from working class, from low socio-economic backgrounds, into year-long salaried roles in the arts and cultural sector. But each of the 3 editions following that first version have responded to changing policy and changing practice and become, we hope, ever more inclusive as we've learnt a huge amount from each cohort of fellows. During this 13-year period, we've had the pleasure of working with about 170 fellows, about 150 host organisations, and we continue to celebrate in the success stories of all of our alumni. We're delighted to have, I think, with us today, although I haven't seen him yet, Aaron Wright, who was part of the first edition of the programme, working with the Live Art Development Agency, and has just been announced as the new head of performance and dance at South Bank. Also, Junior Akinola, not that he's here today, unfortunately, but he did his fellowship at Contact in Manchester in 2015, and in 2020 he became their chair. And Rosie Elnile, now an award-winning performance designer, following her fellowship at Donmar Warehouse. There are many more, and I just wish I had time to mention them all. Another measure of the programme's success is the willingness of both public and private funders to commit valuable resources during these years. And for some, on the understanding that this is work like this takes time, and they've stuck by us. Garfield Weston Foundation has been on board since 2014, and we're delighted that the programme carries their name. Also, Arts Council England has funded 3 out of 4 of the editions, joined in this edition by Arts Council of Wales and Creative Scotland, and also funded by sector-specific funders such as Art Fund and PRS Foundation. So, onto the toolkit and the reason that we're all here. At the end of the 3rd edition in 2019, we produced our first... Oh, I meant to do this. Oh, I forgot this slide. These, not all the 170 fellows, but hopefully gives a feeling of them through the years. And that lovely one there of us all at Avignon Festival in 2018. So this was our toolkit in 2019, very snappily titled Socio-Economic Diversity and Inclusion in the Arts, a Toolkit for Employers. This was a way of sharing more widely what we and our host organisations had learnt from the programme, and drawing in advice and guidance from those outside our sector working in this area, like the Bridge Group and the Social Mobility Commission. Really at that point, what everyone wanted to know was how to measure socioeconomic background and what to do with the data. We'll be hearing more from our academic partner, Dave O'Brien, shortly, but as he writes in his new paper, it was an important time, this is talking about 2019, it was an important time as social class and the associated issue of social mobility in the cultural sector were given prominence. As Arts Council England published research on understanding the class characteristics of the arts workforce, and instituted a new data collection for MPOs. The old toolkit, we feel, still works as a sort of how-to guide, but as we were going through this 4th edition of the programme, we realised that we needed a completely different focus for our new toolkit, not just an update. We had shifted direction in 2020 to work more closely with our host organisations, supported by the brilliant team at People Make It Work. This was working with host organisations for the first time, acknowledging that organisations need to look at their internal cultures and how they needed to adapt to become more inclusive places to work. Inadvertently, we had been focusing all our attention on our fellows who were ultimately doing a lot of the heavy lifting and bearing the brunt of organisations not being equipped or prepared to adapt to their needs. So this is their toolkit. Their insights and experiences are the driving force, not us, or the organisations they've been working with. So I'd like to pass over to my wonderful colleague, Melissa Wong, who is a project manager and responsible for us all getting to this point. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Melissa. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm a petite Chinese woman in my mid-30s with short black hair and glasses. As Kate said, I was the researcher and project manager for this toolkit. And what that means is over the past year, I had the incredible privilege of gathering insights from this cohort of WJCB fellows as well as alumni on how to drive socioeconomic inclusivity within arts and cultural organizations, and then shaping these insights into the toolkit that we're launching here today. I was also incredibly fortunate to be supported by an amazing steering group who provided invaluable guidance and support and who championed this project throughout. They're Louis Palfrey and Della Hill from the 2017 to 2019 cohort, who we'll be hearing from later today. Joe Rose, Shalika Walters-Watson, Lizzie Lovejoy, and Laura Kester from the most recent cohort, some of whom are in the audience in person and online. And as well, we had some host organizations in the steering group. Helen Phoebe from Yorkshire Sculpture Park, who will also be joining us on stage later this morning, Amy Leach from Leeds Playhouse, and Steph Power from Music Centre Wales. And rounding out the steering group were Claire Thurman from People Make It Work and Lily Geisendorfer from Jerwood Arts. This toolkit that we all created together, which is entitled Teamwork in Practice, Collective Insights, Ideas, and Challenges to Drive Socio-Economic Inclusivity in Your Organization. This toolkit provides insights on how arts and cultural organizations and employers can provide meaningful support for people from working class and low socioeconomic backgrounds. It takes an intersectional approach in creating an empathetic and inclusive organizational culture and driving socioeconomic diversity and inclusivity in the workplace. What makes this toolkit distinctive from the previous toolkit and from other resources is that it was created in collaboration with WJCB fellows and alumni. As Lily and Kate have said, all of the suggested actions come directly from the fellows and the alumni associates themselves, and no organizations or employers contributed to the content. This toolkit is all about listening to the voices of people from working class and low socioeconomic backgrounds, as they are the experts in their own experience. And it's about organizations and employers taking to heart their insight and their expertise on how to create a more inclusive working environment. To create this toolkit, we conducted in-depth interviews and focus groups, and we gathered survey data from fellows and alumni who all identified as coming from working class or low socioeconomic backgrounds, as well as having a range of other identities and circumstances that intersected with their socioeconomic background to impact on their experience of inclusion in the workplace. Contributors came from nearly every region of England, as well as Scotland and Wales. They work across diverse sectors, including performing, visual, and literary arts, as well as multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary practices. They came from binary and non-binary gender identities and sexual orientations, as well as a broad spectrum of ethnic backgrounds and a range of ages. And it also included people from diverse life circumstances, including people with disabilities, long-term health conditions, and caring responsibilities. The result is a toolkit that is wholly grounded in the authentic knowledge, expertise, and experiences of WJCB fellows and alumni. It is not meant to be comprehensive or an authoritative reflection of the preferences of everyone from a working class or low socioeconomic background, because everyone's circumstances and needs will be specific and individual. But we believe that it provides a powerful starting point for reflecting on the challenges faced by people from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and the actions that organizations and employers can take to create a workplace that works for them. This toolkit is for anyone in the arts and cultural sector who's interested in advancing socioeconomic diversity and inclusivity in the workplace. It's especially aimed at you if you're a senior leader, a manager, or you're responsible for managing people, organizational culture, or equity, diversity, and inclusion. It may also be of interest to you if you're a researcher, a funder, or a policymaker who's interested in socioeconomic diversity and inclusion in the arts. This toolkit is also for you if you're from a working class or low socioeconomic background yourself. You may see your own experiences and perspectives reflected in the toolkit, and we hope that this will offer assurance that you're not alone and that it will provide the wider evidence base you need to advocate for change to support your needs. We want as many people as possible to be able to use this toolkit in a way that works for them, so we've provided the toolkit in multiple accessible formats. It's accessible as a printed book, as an accessible PDF for download, in large print, and as an audio recording. In addition, the summary version is available as an easy read, and all of these versions are available in both English and Welsh. So, because this toolkit is all about listening directly to the voices of WJCB fellows and alumni, we've recruited a group of fellows and alumni to help share this toolkit across the sector. Our 6 Toolkit Associates, Jody Cole, Kyle Stead, Lou Bartley Sophocleus, Della Hill, Louis Palfrey, and Ink Asherhemp, are all with us today, and you'll be hearing from them throughout this event. So let me hand it over to Ink and Lou now to tell you more about the toolkit themselves. Thank you.
Morning. Thanks for joining us. My name's Lou. I am a white woman in my 30s wearing a yellow jacket. I use she and they pronouns.
I'm Ink. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a youngish white person with shoulder-length brown hair, and I'm sitting in my wheelchair.
Thank you to Melissa and Kate for such a brilliant summary of what the toolkit and the programme is about. Having been a Weston Jerwood Creative Bursaries participant, having contributed to the toolkit and having spent a few days with the other associates devising and creating around it, I thought I would share with you why the toolkit feels powerful to me. The toolkit aims high. It speaks to employers and to executives, and it centres and amplifies the voices of those who are from a low socio-economic background. In fact, it screams them from the rooftops. It is insight and it is solidarity. When I was a recipient of the Weston Jerwood Creative Bursaries, we would meet up and discuss how things were going. Over the course of the 2-year programme, our conversations were sometimes political, sometimes intense, and we definitely did not always agree. We had many philosophical conversations about what it meant to be on the programme, from a lower socioeconomic background and a working class artist. We discussed whether those words applied to us, whether our circumstances were the same, and whether they could be defined by a single label. We talked about the organisations we worked with, what was frustrating, what was isolating, and what was going well. We also shared how we were mentored and managed, and yes, we also gossiped. However, in Latin American cultures, there's the idea of chisme, which is translated as Spanish from Spanish as gossip, but it's often spoken about as a way of showing solidarity and sharing information that will keep a community safe. Whilst this toolkit is not gossip, it feels like those conversations that I've had in the pub or in working groups or workshops with the fellows over the 5 years I've been involved in the programme. The toolkit really feels like a summary of the way that inclusion is seen by the fellows. It feels like it's giving organisations an insight into those debates in the pub, those conversations between friends and allies struggling in the workplace, and those frank feedback sessions in conference rooms and theatres when we were together as a cohort. It feels like it's giving organisations a chance to listen to those conversations. And as somebody who would love to hear what execs talk about in the pub after work when they're not being listened to, I think that they should want to listen to us. This toolkit is a real gift, and it allows for those conversations. It doesn't take one route through, and it highlights that everyone brings their own perspective. Inclusivity isn't a one-approach-fits-all concept, and when you read the toolkit, you'll find that the quotes within it contradict themselves and that people don't always agree. It feels like a conversation between people, and the contributors have been generous in sharing things from their working lives and their thoughts on inclusivity. It's a real testament to the toolkit's diversity of contributors, to the programme's passion for inclusivity, and the time they dedicate to thinking about it and making sector-wise change. I think that's what makes the toolkit so special. Alumni of the Weston Jerwood Creative Bursaries programme are change makers. Those I've spoken or worked with care deeply. They see the future of art has inclusivity at its very core. They understand that it is a continually developing practice. The people we delicately, tentatively describe as those who face barriers accessing the arts due to socio-economic circumstances are the radical thinkers, artists, makers, marketeers, and audience members who will save your organisations. Practice Makes Progress is a call to arms to the higher-ups. It's a solidarity document. It shares the support we have given each other and the way we have lifted each other up. It is an archive of our experiences and a testament to our commitment to change the sector for the better. Thank you.
For me, the running thread through everything that we've heard this morning, and the running thread through all of the conversations we've had about the toolkit with everyone from all these different perspectives, has always been that what makes it important is that it literally is things that people have said, that it is these quotes from these people with these perspectives. It's from us. And so it felt like those words needed to be here this morning in some way today. It felt, to massively paraphrase and simplify everything that's been said, it seemed slightly weird to say, there's loads of cool people that have said loads of cool things, but not actually have those cool things here today. But I didn't want to just come and like read part of the toolkit, because that also seemed a bit weird, and also then I'd have to choose a bit, and I like all of it. Instead, as a theatre maker and a poet, I decided to take all of the quotes that are in the toolkit and cut them up and make them into a poem. And some of this is like full sentences that people have said. Sometimes it's single words, loads of like 10 people's different words to make a sentence. But I'm hoping what it contains is the energy of the piece overall. Like anything, you could say this is complicated. Before this, I'd never been able to afford to pay for a job in the arts, because I can't work for free. But there I was, all of a sudden you've got over £1,000 in your account, and you're like, oh my God, I'm rich. But the next day, I had to post things overseas, and it cost me 150 quid. That's money I didn't have, but I couldn't say no, because it was someone really important in the company asking me to do it. That's my bills, how I feed myself, keep a roof over my head, that's my house. In the good moments, there was someone there to support me. In the bad moments, I felt isolated and alone. I was never told the building passcodes, and I didn't understand how to ask, so I was just sneaking in every time I saw that someone had opened the door. Getting on with things silently, perpetually made to feel like I had to be grateful that they'd given me this role, because I don't have a degree. An assumption after assumption phrased my lived experience as a skill deficit, which, whatever, maybe I can brush up on Excel. I want to learn things that I don't know, but I can't brush up my background. Maybe culture can be rehearsed, but even inside an iron suit and tie and tailored trousers, this body is common, and I don't want to temper that. I'm common. Just not that common in the arts. During my induction, some people I met spoke with a slight note of disappointment. You don't sound very working class. That tidy box created by middle-class culture for people from other backgrounds. They wanted someone who fit their image, but I don't have the capacity to hold the voice of every working class and marginalized person in my mouth. There's a balance to strike between hearing the opinions of the people you're trying to bring in and putting the onus on them to change the entire organization. This body is not the infrastructure of inclusion, diversity, and access. I know when I'm a tick box exercise and when I'm not. Would you want to feel like you're a token? See, it's not enough to say we're inclusive, because an individual word is not policy, and policy is the bare minimum, and that bare minimum is meaningless without people, because it's practice that makes progress. And we can't move into our future until institutions start to honor that. It's the people at the bottom of the pile. It's always the same people at the bottom of the pile that feel it. When an organization is a machine, constantly working, never reflecting, when the response to asking for change is, we'll get around to it. But those of us that need progress know how long it takes, that this can only be done on a hands-on way. Working in a company that does not know access is not working in a building without a door, it's a building without foundations. And we have so many organizations that need foundations to be laid that will get nowhere caring only about the position of our own stages. So it's time to get invested in our sector as a whole, because progress is listening, and from listening comes dialogue and conversation, the sharing of knowledge. It's time to find your role, because this common body is not the infrastructure of inclusion, diversity, and access. The practice of persistent change requires funds and time and space, committed investment to change. It exists in every decision, in every person, in every day, including those who can't be here right now, in London, my artistic director would come to London. My artistic director would come to London for meetings, conferences, auditions. He'd hold them here instead of in our local city. Why are we in London right now? Being inclusive as a workplace means bringing your community into what you're creating, knowing your community leaders and members and local activists. You need to question who you're making work for. You need to question who you're working for. Speak to us, listen to them, but not in an outreach way. Just going to say it explicitly, thinking as an outsider, I don't identify as outreach. There are so many creatives working in front of house and bars who are never considered for any of the artistic opportunities, which seems like a really strange thing to do. When inclusivity is not a side project, this is not an extra, an add-on, or an afterthought. A production is not done if access has been considered, because it has not been considered, because there will always be culture. Culture will always exist. But the longer institutions put off meaningful, committed work on diversity, the more the arts sector becomes meaningless. Without this work, there is a day in the future where this industry is no longer relevant at all. The most condescending thing to assume is that working class communities will be grateful to be a tick box exercise in another person's project. Our role has always been to survive, to keep going, to keep existing. A working class body, this working class body, has to be inherently creative. And if institutions don't want communities, communities will make their own culture. Maybe that's why I do what I do. I don't know. I love doing what I do, being here with you today. I love my work. It makes existing make sense. It makes me happy. There's not a huge number of jobs out there that people love, where they're passionate about their role and they care about doing a good job. If you're in a creative industry, you go into it because you want it inside, because it's your passion. There's so much energy, which, yes, we all know and need to acknowledge is too often taken by entitled organizations and managers as an okay to overwork, underpay, and exploit people's boundaries. The same problem speaks again. But there is so much energy, so much committed energy in this industry. We're all here because we want to be. And that passion is why I can only approach this with hope. Because some of us are doing it. Some of you are doing it. And for me, hope isn't something you feel, but it's something you do, something you get on with. And we aren't always going to get it right. Initially, we definitely won't. We'll get things wrong. But like anything, what's important is that we learn from those mistakes and that we hold each other to account. This isn't work that we do individually, because it's hard to do on your own. If you're isolated, so hard to see where to start when you're so inside of it, where to start and where to go. It's only when we pull the weight equally that the load, the strain gets easier. It's so obvious, but together we are stronger than alone. When I started this, I said it was complicated, which in many ways it is, but it's also really simple. This is care, but not in a seminar way or a reimbursing staff mental health support way. This is the context of care that we embed in the structure, the body of our sector. If all employees are struggling, they don't need mindfulness or a mental health seminar. That organization needs more staff. Proactive inclusion, a meaningful commitment to accessibility, is community healthcare. And I'm not sure what's more important. Because if we don't look after each other, there won't be any work made. If we don't look after each other, there will be no one here to make it. So come in as you are and shout about what's possible, because we're recruiting for a future where the stages are for all, the buildings have foundations, everyone has the printer codes, and the doors aren't closed. Thank you.
both of you. Thank you so much. Thank you for bringing your passion to this stage. Wow, thank you. Just to say, if any of you want to watch that again, this whole live stream video will be on our YouTube channel straight away afterwards. So watch it, share it, watch those speeches again and again. Thank you very much. So, moving on, I want to sort of quick introduction to Professor Dave O'Brien, who has been a really important partner for this programme for about the last 5 years or so. He's now the Professor of Creative and Cultural Industries at University of Sheffield and a co-instigator at AHRC's Policy and Evidence Centre. He's incredibly knowledgeable about inequalities in our sectors, and I'm sure many of you know him. Dave, unfortunately, can't be with us today, but he's pre-recorded a video.
So, good morning, everybody. My name's Professor Dave O'Brien. I'm a Professor of Cultural and Creative Industries at the University of Sheffield. And I'm sorry I can't be with you in person this morning. I'm just going to share my screen to get us going for my talk, to introduce and give a bit of context to the debates and the ideas you're going to be discussing today. I'm going to be talking really about my role over the past 3 or 4 years with Jerwood, which has been, I guess, kind of providing research support and setting some context for the programme's most recent iteration. I'm going to try and set some context for the trends, both short, medium and longer term, in terms of employment in cultural and creative industries, essentially talking about the problems that this set of sectors has got really in terms of inequality. And then I'm going to think through some of the broader trends, both critiques of things like social mobility, changes in policy and changes in organisational practice as well. Just to give you some background, most of what I'm going to be talking about today is drawn from 2 sources. One is a recent book that I co-authored called Culture's Bad for You. The other is a recent report that I also co-authored called Social Mobility in the Creative Economy. And these 2 sources really have got the most up-to-date statistics on employment in cultural and creative industries. What you can hopefully see on this slide, and you might be able to see my cursor drawing your attention to particular parts of the slide, is the class composition, the socio-economic origin composition of the cultural and creative workforce in the UK. On this top part of the screen, you can see we visualised the class composition of the cultural and creative workforce using a bit of a donut. What you can see here is my colleagues, Heather and Olivia, use this term, the privileged category. Myself and Oreen and Mark in Culture's Bad for You use a sort of technical term, which is professional and managerial origins. I guess in sort of popular discourse, we think about this as sort of middle class origins. About half of creative workers are from these middle class professional managerial origins. So we can say that the creative industries are a sort of middle class set of industries by the origins of its workforce. This compares with about a quarter that are from what we call working class social origins, which is obviously a big difference in terms of proportion. And this compares quite unfavourably with the rest of the population. The other donut that you can see up there suggests that just under 40% of the population, the kind of workforce in the UK is from working class social origins, just under 40% are from these middle class origins. So we've got a bit of an imbalance. Now, unfortunately, the parts of the creative industries that Jerwood are most interested in are some of the worst performers, really. And when we start to dig into things like music performance and visual arts, which is this column here, what we can see is that nearly 60% of of those working as musicians, performers, or visual artists in the UK at the moment are from middle class, professional, managerial, privileged social origins. The story in museums, galleries and libraries is better, although I should say much of that is driven by librarians. Drilling down into the class composition of curators is tricky because the numbers are quite small, but those small numbers aren't really telling us good news. So on the whole, we've got a bit of a class problem in terms of who works in cultural and creative industries, and particularly who works in some of those kind of core art forms, those core jobs of being musicians, performers and artists. When we look at particular individual occupations, this is a slightly sort of provocative way of framing this, we can see that things like being a musician, being an artist, being an arts officer, producer and director, so a kind of an arts manager, someone who's running arts institutions, running arts programs, what we can see is they're some of the poshest jobs in the UK economy. Unfortunately, the kind of the story here is that not only are we seeing this kind of imbalance compared to the rest of the population and compared to working class representation in these particular occupations, but these jobs compare sort of with being, say, a barrister and a judge, being a dentist, being a doctor, being a solicitor, in terms of just how middle class the origins of the workforce are. Now, we might say, you know, is this a new thing? Is this recent? You know, has this come in the last 10 years as a result of, say, coalition or conservative policy? Well, actually, if we look in the medium term, what we can see is that this issue has been fairly kind of sticky. The thickest sort of black lines in these graphs are the trends since 2014, which is the first year that the Office for National Statistics started collecting this data. And what we can see here is that you know, music, performing and visual arts has been pretty consistent around this kind of 50 or 60% drawn from this managerial professional set of origins. Museums, galleries and libraries, there seems to have been some decline in recent years, but we'd be cautious about this because the numbers are quite small. This might be a little bit of noise in the trends. Really, actually, the kind of story to be told across these sets of jobs is in the light grey line, where we can see that consistently there isn't really a big boom, there isn't a big rise in working class representation. The percentage of those from working class origins in most creative occupations, but in museums, galleries, libraries and music, performing and visual arts occupations, is consistently around a fifth, sort of around 20%-ish most years. This is, you know, underrepresentation compared to the rest of the population, but it also tells a story of even where there seems to be good news about the elite composition of these jobs, actually what's going on is still fairly consistent working class exclusion. And long term, this is data drawn from the ONS's longitudinal study, which is a sample of the census linked together since 1971. What we can see, I won't dwell on this too long, but what we can see is that if you were from a middle class origin in the early 1980s, you were about 4 times as likely to be working in a cultural and creative occupation. There's been a massive transformation of the class composition of British society since the early 1980s, but by the time we get to 2011, that 4 times ratio, that 4 to 1 ratio is still there, even despite all of these kind of major changes, both in the arts and in British society. And we've written a recent paper on this, you know, happy to share this if it's of interest. This long-term story then suggests that the problems of socio-economic exclusion, you know, the kind of class problems in our arts sector are a long-term and very sticky and very difficult problem. And in the PEC report, we try and show how there are various kind of stages to this, how it's not just something that can be solved through one kind of easy trick or one particular organisational change. You know, we need something a little bit more substantive and substantial. And that really has been the story of where policy has been. I think now there's some consensus, both in certainly the academic work, but also increasingly in organisations and some parts of policy support, that what we've seen is that social mobility has really not really changed the structural problems that the sector has got, even though it's been incredibly successful in supporting individuals to kind of get in and to make it and have successful creative careers. These individual stories of success, which are really important that we kind of foreground them and celebrate them, are really against the backdrop of fairly kind of static structural problems. And this actually is one of the reasons you're going to hear about this today, that the Creative Bursaries programme has tried to shift from just being an individual-focused programme to a programme that is focused on facilitating organisational change for hosts, but getting to think more widely about organisational change across the sector. And indeed, this takes place against the backdrop of a fairly sort of complex set of critiques of social mobility that say, actually, this is not just a problem of individual success, but structural inequality in the arts sector, but this is a problem right across British society. A British society that, is seeing increasingly difficult conditions for not just artists and creatives, but, sort of for everybody in terms of class inequality, cost of living crises, and indeed, the kind of contemporary Brexit Britain settlement. The most recent interventions, I think, in the policy space, and here are just two examples, have really drawn on this shift away from focusing on individual social mobility to think more expansively about structural and organisational change, and actually to hear sort of demands for really sort of social justice in the arts. So two examples, a recent report, I'm a co-author of this, published by the Policy and Evidence Centre, tried to review job quality, I guess kind of asking what is good work in the creative industries, focusing on things like the need for pay, progression, anti-bullying policies, the idea of kind of worker voice and worker control in creative industries, really trying to foreground the way that a lot of these structural problems that social mobility has been designed to address on an individual level really do need things like, more significant regulation and more serious interventions from organisations. And similarly, the all-party parliamentary group for creative diversity report, the creative majority report that some of you might be familiar with, whilst it gave individual suggestions to organisations about how they might recruit differently, how they might mentor differently, how they might progress careers differently, the overall story that report tells is the need for an intersectional approach to really get to grips with structural inequalities that goes far beyond just supporting one or two individual staff every year into often just entry-level moments in their careers. And as a result, to kind of draw this to conclusion and maybe to set up some of the discussions that you're going to have today, I think tackling these long-term, sticky, kind of wicked problems of class inequalities is a job that goes far beyond something like just having a social mobility statement or just having social mobility policy. Really what we need is a transformation of the sector, really. It's good to see organisations like Arts Council England, the BFI, various others starting to take seriously things like data collection frameworks, but I think we're still some way away from seeing really significant interventions that are going to be transforming the socio-economic basis of our arts organisations. And as the APPG report suggested, the questions of what's going to be effective have to think through an intersectional perspective. Just focusing on often cliched versions of socioeconomic diversity, class diversity, can lead to a lack of change over time. And similarly, again, thinking about things like working conditions, which maybe don't seem immediately to be to do with social mobility, actually can be some of the most transformative things organisations can do, particularly in terms of fair and decent pay and often equal pay as people go through their careers. So I guess the question is, how can we have these sort of structural interventions? What sorts of policies are needed if we're not going to be back here celebrating possibly another decade, another 13 years of creative bursaries interventions, but actually telling a similar structural story of a lack of change? So, good morning, everybody. My name's...
That was amazing. Thank you, Dave. I know you're not listening at the moment, but he's been so incredibly important to the programme, rooting us in current policy and practice, in academic research, and continuing to push the fact that data collection in order to move forward. So thank you, Dave. I'm now really delighted to welcome our two special guests who are going to be in conversation with two more of our Toolkit Associates who you'll be meeting. Dame Deborah Bull, I think needs no introduction. After many years as a ballet dancer, worked at Royal Opera House and King's College London, and is now devoted to her role in the House of Lords. And Hilary Carty, who is the Executive Director at Claw Leadership, with a lot of experience in organisational change and leadership. And they will be in conversation with Della Hill and Kyle Steed, two of our associates, talking, I hope, a very sort of personal view about their work in the sector. If you'd like to come and join us on stage.
Nice to finally meet you in person. It's lovely to see you.
What's happening, everyone? I'll kick off here. I'm Kyle Stead. I'm a white Welsh man with short ginger hair and a full ginger beard that many men are envious of. I'm wearing a lilac top with blue ripped jeans.
I'm Della Hill. Lovely to see you all. I'm a mixed race woman. I've got big curly hair. I'm wearing a black top and blue jeans.
Good morning, I'm Hilary Carty. I'm a black woman and I'm wearing a green top and I've got short grey hair.
Hi, I'm Deborah Bull. I'm a white woman, older than I'd like to be. I'm wearing a black jacket and I have sort of shoulder-length, mid-brownish hair. Actually, I think it's gone blonde. I was locked down for you.
So thanks for joining us, those here in person and those on the live stream. So we'll be having a conversation now, really focusing on the art sector, but really emphasising on inclusivity, diversity and leadership. We're all excited to be here. Like many double acts, you have got us for an hour, but you are, great to hear that there is no ad breaks. So kicking off, we like to kind of look through the lens of art leadership. And have you got any examples that you can share with us on the sector of positive inclusion?
Can get me to go first. Well, I'm not dodging that question, but I'm going to say that I think one of the interesting things about leadership is working out your own personal style and how you work. And what I know about my own personal style is what I really want to do after those last two presentations is reflect. Actually the last thing I want to do is answer questions right now. I will, of course, answer questions, but it did make me think as I saw that, goodness, as leaders, we put ourselves in situations where we are not comfortable and not working to our style. And I feel like I'm in one of those right now. Inclusive leadership, I probably look around at all of you and say, you may know more about this than I do. Because my background in the arts is as a ballet dancer, and my goodness, there is nothing inclusive about how you lead the work in a ballet studio. Nobody invites the corps de ballet to, contribute to the process except by doing what they're told. So all of this, as somebody I think there's something generational. When we had a little prep talk, we we talked about the generational aspect here and how one has to make, either make a transformation or step aside. And I think this is a really important thing about leadership, is knowing when you're not in the right place. And stepping aside is an act of inclusive leadership, actually, because you're making space for others who can do these. I think one can be an inspirational individual without necessarily being an organisational leader. And we historically have confused the two. And sometimes we need to recognise that they are separate roles. So I have totally dodged the question, actually, there. I've totally dodged the question, but hopefully that's food for thought. And I may well come back. I mean, I would say some of the most inclusive examples I've seen are through the What Next network. And, that is many of you. And I've observed people within What Next acting in ways, putting in place things that have, almost blown my mind, because, as I say, with my background, I look at things and say, my goodness, that's an original way of looking at something, but I see why you're doing it. So yes, some of the What Next sort of movement has been a place where I've really learned things. Hilary.
Sure. I think I've seen many examples over the years of positive, inclusive, caring leadership development. A couple that strike me are the investment in cultural leadership learning back in 2005-06. And what was wonderfully inclusive then was that the Arts Council, which was leading alongside another couple of funders and creative and cultural skills, started by asking questions rather than coming out with answers and initiatives. And they asked questions of the sector. They asked what's working, what's not working, and how could we make a positive difference. And in digesting those responses, they developed a real plethora of approaches to leadership development, to organisational shifts, and to positive change. And they opened up leadership learning from just being about courses and attending different activities, to networking, to action learning, to workplace leadership, and all of those sorts of things. And I think that that makes a difference when you start by asking questions rather than coming out with initiatives. So that, I know, led to a number of different shifts in sector practice. I mean, you have to acknowledge the Weston Jerwood bursaries if you're going to talk about actions. And one of the things that I think is particularly notable is the long-term investment. One of the challenges in this area is initiative-itis and those short-term interventions that are funding-led. And funders somehow seem to think 2 years is a lifetime. And you don't get, as an organisation or as an individual, enough time to get in, learn, develop, move through, and then know what you're doing and act with purpose. And the fact that the bursaries have been going over a long time is what I think is making the difference.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. We've got a question about funding. I'll save that till I've broken us in a bit. We're not going to jump political at the moment. So thinking about, and I know Kate said that there's over 150 of us, which is insane, and we're kind of part of a huge group of, I guess, leaders, and as we've listened to change makers, we really actively try to make that change. So thinking about the future, what advice would you guys give to us as maybe we start to take some positions and we're in the kind of seat to make decisions? What kind of, where would you steer us?
I would say what's really critical is get your network sorted. Don't go this one alone, because working in our sector is challenging on a number of different fronts. And I know that one of my major sources of courage and replenishment and just energy is the networks that I've cultivated over the years. And I would say that, you have 150 that have been through a similar experience as you have. There's a shared common experience there, which means that they know a little bit of what you're going through. And holding on to those networks is really, really important as a form of sustenance. So yes, look for opportunities, make sure you advance, but don't lose ground of the people who will work with you and will actually be part of your source of strength going forward.
Thank you.
Obviously, that's brilliant advice, and I would echo that. So I think, you know, you are the future, and the long-term change. I mean, it's very stark listening to Dave. He's completely brilliant, and I'm always totally inspired by him. But I think also it is a bit depressing to see how slowly we are changing. But the logic to me is that as a generation of new leaders emerges who literally are wired differently, so are not, you know, having to remind themselves to think this way, but actually do think this way, and that's you guys, and you know, you're en masse now. I mean, that's just from this program. You're en masse. There'll be claw leaders coming through too, you know, who think differently. So one has to hope that as you filter up into organisational leadership positions, we will see the structural and the systemic change that's needed. But there's a lot of influencing needs to go on, because, you know, that, I think it was that penultimate slide of Dave's where there's a sort of a stripe on the left, and it starts with, you know, in my language, it's, well, you know, arts and culture is not in my family, it's not in my education, it's not in careers guidance, I don't live in London, my family's not wealthy, you know, how am I going to get in? You know, those are structural, systemic, and they're policy issues. And so you are going to need, more weight on your shoulders, but we're all with you. You are going to not only need to lead your organisations in very inclusive ways, but you need to engage with policymakers too, because we need the policies to change so that these structural, these deeply embedded inequities which are baked into our systems from day one, they will only change when policy and legislation changes. And you know, you are the storytellers, you have the communication skills, you are the lived experience, and so, you know, engaging with, you know, don't just get angry with the policymakers, engage with them, because that's how things are going to change.
Thank you. I think I love that mishmash of question, like all your answers, because we were talking last night about burning out. I mean, already we're relatively early career, kind of getting to the midpoint, and we've had fantastic opportunities, kind of mainly from Jerwood, outside of our kind of core practices. And I guess that the formula which we spoke about is that, okay, we can keep going, but actually the only thing that we're going to rely on is the people around us that know what we're going through. And I think this is why this is such an important document. I mean, I'm a drama queen. I think everyone that knows me knows I'm over dramatic. But what this gave me is a bit of a chance to sit there and think, okay, for once in my life, maybe I wasn't overreacting when I kind of spotted an issue somewhere along my career. So thank you. I think that's fantastic advice.
Can I so add one thing? Because I thought that poem was fantastic, because it you know, it kind of hit you between the eyes with some of the things that are in there, and a couple of things struck me. One, that line, my goodness, you don't need a mindfulness workshop, we just need more staff, and that was just so true, and I can't solve that one. But the other piece is the totemic. You know, for me, it's you're the female Billy Elliot. And you know, once you are made a totem for your organisation, you know, that's exhausting. It's so much weight on your shoulders, and it distances you both from your background community and the community you're in. And so really working against, and it's really hard because the media loves a Billy Elliot or whatever the equivalent is in whichever sector, but working against that and, you know, kind of refusing to be the totem. You know, so that we are no longer, what was that other brilliant line? I'm common, just not common in the arts. So I think that's something to really, you know, be aware of, and not let people play that card on you.
But I think if I can pick up on that, thank you for bringing that point. the key thing is that the shift that the bursaries have made, and it's registered in this toolkit, is taking the responsibility from the individual to moving it to the organisations and the sector as a whole. And that's the critical difference. Because it's quite tough when you're the only one and you're not the highest level or paid or whatever. It's quite hard to find your courage to challenge and to say, no, I will not be treated that way. That's really tough. But if the organisation takes responsibility for good practice, then that makes it different, because you're not then battling. You're actually working within a system that understands that your difference is an asset. And that's more of what we need to really encourage and facilitate, that as a sector and that as organisations, we make fundamental systemic shifts so that we are not setting up barriers to entry and barriers to progression, but actually we're making that possible for all.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's really important, like what you both have said, it complements each other, like, you know, network strength in numbers to then attack and really drive policy change. But I think it's important, like you mentioned previously about time, like how you don't become the poster boy for a period of time, and how if an organisation really wants to develop that change, that it's not, okay, we need you for 3 months because investment reviews come in and we need your input because you're the poster boy, that how you can really work with some of that long period. I think that's what's important. And like that's important, like with Jerwood and with us being fellows, like my cohort was like 50 or 51 fellows, like there's strength in numbers. We all got the, you know, similar views. Yeah, they contradict each other, but that's what's important, because that drives that we're all individual and that it isn't a one size fits all. But yeah, I feel like that's really important. We touched just briefly then earlier that when we spoke before.
Can I suggest you just pull your microphone away from your neck?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's following anyone else, but it's rubbing a bit. Yeah, perfect.
You got it.
I'll try that.
All good?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
So we touched then briefly on the dance background and how you both come from a dance background and leaderships, and obviously we're in Sadler as well as today. Do you want to share a bit more with the audience how you feel that your dance background influences your leadership style?
And heads up, you pretty much said the same thing. So as soon as we were off the call, we were like, right, this needs to be asked.
Well, dancers rule or should rule the world. It's quite simple. We're in a dance building. I think we can. One doesn't want to kind of overlay the cliche, but I do think that one of the things that you really learn, and I wouldn't say this is exclusive to dance, but I can talk from the experience, what you learn when you're a dancer and when you're in the studio or on stage is you learn to read yourself and you learn to read the group around you. You learn to understand, where am I supposed to be right now? Am I supposed to be at the front, setting forward, leading, with others following me in chorus? Or am I supposed to be the chorus? Therefore, my job is to fall in line, look exactly the same as the person next to me, and help, support, take forward. So you learn your positioning. You learn what is my role right now. You learn connectivity with others. And I think those skills in the workplace are completely essential, because you learn to read yourself in context, rather than just going, okay, here's my bright idea, I'm going to say it. You learn to understand, even though I've got a bright idea, this might not be the place and the time. And I think all of those dynamics that you learn in the studio carry you into the profession and encourage you to put yourself in context rather than just out there shoving.
Agreed. My background was in ballet, so in a very kind of historic legacy sort of environment. I don't just mean the repertoire, but actually the technique, handed down for generations. So I think you certainly learnt about leadership, because I mentioned earlier, there's always a leader at the front of the room, and you can observe what works and what doesn't work. You learn about learning by watching. So you become very observant of people and of things, so you learn that way. You learn about testing things in the marketplace, so it's on the stage, but the feedback you get either from the audience directly or from from your teachers, the coaches, or indeed from the reviews, so you're learning about that trial and error in the marketplace. The crucial thing is you learn about failing, so you learn very early on that failure is your major teacher. Not just emotionally, but neurologically, that's how you learn to do things right, is by doing them wrong. So you should celebrate failure, it's a step on the road to success. And you also, in the environment I was in, you learn a lot about the tension between heritage and innovation. So how to make the past a springboard to the future, not a straitjacket that constrains what you do. And that's a very, very real tension in that kind of environment. I think, as I reflected on right at the beginning, in the ballet environment in particular, and I know, the process in a rehearsal room with a contemporary-based choreographer, I learned the difference when I started to work with Siobhan Davis and then Wayne McGregor. It was kind of mind-blowing to be asked to contribute to the making of the dance rather than to recreate accurately what had been before. And I think, there's something there about inclusivity that to me, is unfamiliar in my sort of, literally in my muscles and bones actually, because it's not how I learn. So that's been an intellectual exercise from an adult perspective, whereas many of the other things I started to learn before I was really an adult. I started to dance when I was 7. So some of these things, learning from failure, watching, observing, feedback, how does that feel, is that right? That's all learned as a child, so it's in my system in a different way. Whereas this question of how to, this question of inclusivity is something I've considered as an adult, so I approach it sort of differently with a different set of lenses and skills.
Thank you. And just touching on, because I love this kind of analogy of, I'm just picturing, a formation of dancers that might have their particular spots. And I guess quite a lot of our words in the toolkit weren't actually mentioned when we were with our host organisations. We were relatively early career, there's some quite bold statements in this. So as leaders, how would you kind of facilitate an environment where we can say, a big question, sorry, where we can maybe feel slightly more comfortable to share our thoughts or worries or aspirations? How would you approach that?
I think the key thing is to be open and to be honest and to show by example that a comment that contradicts or challenges is not a threat to you. And you've got to say it, you've got to repeat it, and you've got to demonstrate it. So you've got to embrace dissent, and you've got to actively draw it out and bring it into the space so that it encourages others that actually it's okay to challenge or to register a different opinion. And that just takes time. It takes a back and forth. But as a leader, you have to actively encourage dissent. It won't naturally come because we're very obedient, well brought up, well-mannered individuals. So it won't necessarily come. You have to seek it out, nurture it, and develop an environment where people learn over time. You will work through that rather than brush it aside or ignore it. It takes time.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's the most difficult thing, isn't it? Because we take things personally. We do, because, most of us are trying our best all the time. And so when we get it wrong and we're told we get it wrong, we take it personally. That's a really hard thing to break. I think creating a culture in which, and I use the word failure, and I know that's a negative word, but falling over from a double pirouette feels like failure. But if we can create a culture where wrong turnings or missteps are openly discussed across the piece, then actually these missteps or getting it wrong in terms of style or practices or can also be put on the table. I guess any sort of psychotherapist will probably tell us that in our relationships, the difficult conversations are the things that ultimately strengthen the relationship, because by making yourself vulnerable and open, you can create a sort of a genuine and positive relationship. And I think that probably does translate into professional relationships too. You know, for them to be genuine partnerships and collaborations, which, you know, working relationships should be, being able to have those difficult conversations will eventually strengthen things. But like everything, they take practice. It's the word we started with today, isn't it? You know, practice makes progress.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think time is running away from us, so if we could just ask both of you to give us one thing that excites you about the emerging leaders coming through the sector.
I think what excites me is the bolshiness of the sets that are coming through. It's terrifying, I tell you. Go easy on us. It's terrifying, but it is necessary. And it is exciting because it makes you understand that change is amongst us. We just have to have courage and keep going with it.
And that's really interesting. You know, Hilary saying, go easy on us. I echo that. What that phrase means is, you have the power. You know, that is what's behind that phrase. And actually, you know, use it. I was going to say the courage. The bolshiness might be the same thing, but the courage. And I think also the care and compassion. Now I'm going to say that you show, and I'm not putting you in a separate box, you know, we are all we, but that your generation, the care and compassion that you show for each other, the inclusivity that you model is absolutely what is inspiring. It's like a creed, you know, it's a philosophy, isn't it, of the way that you know, you're kind of living your lives. It's not just a workplace thing, and that's what I find really inspiring.
Well, thank you so much, guys. We've just got a masterclass. I should have made it. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been lovely to speak to you, and we're going to welcome our next conversation.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both so much. I was scribbling down things, but I won't mention all of them, others will be here all day, but I love the bolshiness is terrifying and necessary, and the terrifying means that you have power. But the strength in numbers, the importance of networks, and engaging with policymakers, stick at it. That's really important. Thank you so much. And I loved your question about how to bring up these conversations. Really, really important. Thank you so much. I'm now thrilled to welcome to the stage our final panel for the day. Delighted to have 4 representatives from our host organisations from this last edition of the programme who will be in conversation with Della and Kyle again. Please welcome Helen Phoebe from Yorkshire Sculpture Park, Pippa Frith from Fierce, Deborah Kaiser from T-Care, and Daniel Poole, who was at Derby Theatre and now at NN Contemporary. Please join us.
Welcome, guys. Ready for round 2? I'm just going to pass you. Yeah. You can, if you want to grab them. Thank you. So can we do the audio descriptions? Can we start with you, Helen, please? Is that right?
My name's Helen Phoebe. I'm a woman in her 40s, white woman with shortish hair and a black dress.
Hi, I'm Daniel Poole. I'm a man in his mid-30s. I'm in a grey top and black trousers. Probably qualify myself as one of those people who's jealous of Carl's beard, but thanks for pointing that out.
I'm Deborah Kaiser. I'm a white woman in my mid-50s with grey hair and wearing black with a white stripe.
Yeah, I'm Pippa Frith. I'm a white woman with kind of wavy blonde hair. And today I'm wearing a beige and white Adidas sort of 70s jumpsuit.
I'm vibing it. I am vibing that. Well, welcome, guys, and thank you so much for joining us. We caught up last week, the week before, and had quite a powerful conversation that we probably overrun a bit. So we're going to try to maybe reflect on some of the things that we said. And my first question, I'm a bit conscious of time because I'm sure we're going to have loads to say. So I'm not necessarily going to direct it. Whoever gets first can take it. But I'm really interested to know what made you apply to the Weston Jerwood Creative Bursaries. What was that initial moment that you chose the programme as host organisations?
From Yorkshire Sculpture Park, it feels like inclusivity is in our DNA. We were founded in 1977 in what were the mining communities of West and South Yorkshire, where there was very little opportunity for cultural engagement. But also, I think from a personal point of view, having been told from my background to lower my aspirations, that I think at the Sculpture Park, hopefully we have a policy of trying to open doors but keep them open. So I suppose professionally and personally, it just aligned really strongly.
Fantastic.
Shall I come in? I think we've got quite a different story from TCAD, in that we were coming from a place of probably quite exclusionary practice, really. We were working mainly in classical music, which is not a problem, but it brought with it a whole load of barriers. And we were moving to a place where we wanted to broaden the aesthetic of the artists we were working with, and broaden the nature of the people that we were working with. We'd already done a project called Africa. We're based in the Wells Millennium Centre in Bute Town, which was sort of plonked onto sort of Tiger Bay, where Shirley Bassey comes from. And the community there was never consulted at all, was not part of that, the design of that place. So we were trying to reach the people of that community with a project called Africa, and it was in the light of that the opportunity to apply for this came, and it felt like we needed help to do this work, and it felt like the opportunity to get the help.
Okay, fab.
I think for Derby Theatre at the time, there'd been a huge amount of work that the team had done to focus on how our artistic practice was inclusive, and I think organisational culture-wise, it kind of fell to individuals and fell to people just knowing what the Derby Theatre way was, but not a lot of time had actually been dedicated to kind of working on that as a team, really. And I think the organisational development side of the opportunity was as exciting for us as getting an amazing fellow in IFA. So it felt like it was the right time to try and I suppose move that on a little bit more, but also kind of build a cohort of organisations. We've spoken about the kind of amazing cohort of associates, but now I feel like I've got a list of 50 organisations who I'd have maybe been afraid to pick the phone up to before, who I can pick the phone up to and be really honest now in a new position and go, oh, this isn't working, or have you tried this, or have you done that? And that's something that you don't ever make time for. Like, it's so easy to put to the bottom of the list, but we've heard already how important those networks are. So I think, yeah, that's the why. And resource. There's something about that as well. Like, there was contribution towards the fellow's salary, and I don't think that should be left out of these conversations, because that was incredibly helpful as well.
Yeah, so I'd really echo that that resource being a pull, but I think really for us, Fierce's artistic director was on the first cohort of the Weston Jerwood Bursary. I think it was called something else actually back then. And so he has a very live experience of that journey and what that can do. And is the artistic director of an organisation now, it sort of shows the trajectory that's there. And so it felt really obvious and clear to us that this was right, that this was a programme that made a real difference, and we felt really excited by it. And also, I would just echo that on the resources, we're a really small organisation, constantly striving to kind of do more than perhaps we have capacity for sometimes, and so that opportunity to also do that in a way that was resourced and be able to do that with care it was vital to who we are and our kind of organisational DNA. And so yeah, it felt a bit like a no-brainer for us, I guess.
Yeah, great. You touched then, and Dan, you touched on kind of the benefits of the host development side, which is obviously the benefit for us as well, is that network. Like for my cohort, there was 50 other people I could reach out to, and it's great to see that the organisations had that as well. touching on the benefits of the programme, how did your host organisation look at recruitment and become more inclusive as part of the Jerwood scheme?
Shall I jump in here? Recruitment, I don't think I expected recruitment to be the major change from this project, but it really has been. It's completely transformed the way we recruit, not only for staff members, also for trustees. I remember a revelatory meeting, one of the organisation development meetings, when Richard Watts, who's here, was sort of talking about what your trustees could be, not just a bunch of skills, but actually a bunch of people with really different experiences. And we've got out to recruitment and we've got some brilliant trustees as a result. And for our artist opportunities as well, we've really unpicked everything, the way that we ask people to approach us, what we ask them for, and it's changed our organisation actually completely.
Yeah, I think the recruitment side of things was the real kind of first big step change, and there was some practical things that you could put in place. I'm quite kind of practically minded, so like there were some things that overnight we changed in the way that our application forms were structured, the way that we collected data, the way that we wrote job descriptions, having external people on panels, like loads of things that changed overnight, that when we recruited our fellow, we realised we had a totally different group of people in front of us towards like other recruitment campaigns we'd done previously. And a bit of me was like, well, this is a very particular opportunity, it has a shiny Jerwood and all the other stamps on it, maybe that's why. But when we replicated that across the rest of our recruitment, we saw that that impact continued, and it really was a kind of like night and day shift. The thing I will highlight though around recruitment is the discipline to keep that up is really hard, because it takes longer. It costs more money. If you want an external person on a panel, you obviously need to pay them. That costs more. You're going to advertise for longer. That costs more. You don't write in proper notice periods, so you end up with people leaving a long time before the replacement comes in. And it takes a lot of discipline. You can get a bit weary with it at times, but you have to kind of stick by your guns to kind of keep going and know that everyone in your organisation is on the kind of journey with you. And even if they're not interviewing, say, all the time, make sure that they're understanding why this recruitment process has changed, because it may just be an added inconvenience for them in terms of if they're processing applications or setting things up for interview days. Like, you need to bring everybody along with you on that journey, because it does take longer, and it is a more considered process than what we've kind of been used to, of just getting people to send cover letters and CVs and coming in for 10 surprise questions and expecting to get good outcomes.
And I think we found it was really simple things, but really effective things, just including photos of ourselves and bios just meant it felt more welcoming. Having just more conversational questions than an application form, really encouraging transferable skills and experiences. And I think the key takeaway and something we're really trying to do is feedback to everybody personally about why that particular application wasn't successful, and that doesn't say that that person doesn't have potential, or, you know, and just taking that time to we had some really moving and brilliant feedback from people who didn't get the point, who weren't selected, that it had made just a massive difference to them and the way they saw themselves in the sector, that somebody had taken the time to just communicate that. And that's just a simple thing, but as gatekeepers, which we are, to actually acknowledge that and own that and see what we can do in that position, not just for those who were successful, but the 120 others who applied.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Reflecting on my interview, it was with the National Literature Company at Wales, and in Wales, and I was thinking, oh my God, what literature do I mention despite doing a degree? I mentioned Stormzy, and I still got the role, and it was such a different kind of atmosphere. And I'm not too bad at interviews in general. I'm one of those persons that I'll do it and walk out the room and I'll think, God, what did I just say? But I didn't in that situation, and it was in a coffee shop and we were chatting, and it kind of just felt like this. And just to think that moment changed not even the kind of the course of my career, but actually my life, it's just so worth it. Obviously, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, but I think it's really important that we keep talking about it as kind of leaders. Fantastic. So My next question, I'm going to go off script, sorry.
Go on.
What was the best bit? If you had to pick out one moment that you had a fellow, or you were just about to prep, or they just left, what was the best bit for you that you'll never forget? I'll give you a couple of moments. Sorry, big question.
It has been, the whole programme has been amazing, and I think a lot of the meetings were happening during COVID, and it felt like a community, you know, this online community. Today has been amazing, you know, it's been really moving, and it's been really balanced, and you know, the Dave O'Brien's presentation alongside the poem, alongside, so it's like the quantitative and the qualitative together. But I mean, I think in defence of what Dave O'Brien was saying that only a few individuals may have been supported. That's 50 individuals last year. They're going to support another 50 individuals who will support another 50. And I think that's the thing to hang on to. It's part of a movement, and each cohort is a network who will network outside their networks. And as they move through and up the sector, that's change. That's a wave of change that's happening. So that's, you know, my big takeaway from the whole programme, really.
I think it's not like one thing. I think for us it was almost a reassurance or a confidence that this work is knotty and difficult, and we were on the right path, and we're a relatively young leadership team, holding various protected characteristics between us, and I think often that imposter syndrome and like that confidence can creep in. And I think that what being part of the cohort did for Fierce actually is make us go, oh man, we're actually on some of this, like we're doing some of this right, and we've got to keep going, and we've got to like sit in our confidence a little bit more to like speak up and be like, yeah, because that, it's hard when you're a tiny little organisation and you're kind of scrabbling around and you're doing what you can. But actually, there was this sort of strange sense of feeling seen through the host programme, in particular for us. Like, we'd go into these rooms and we'd suddenly realise, like, oh, actually, we have been doing a recruitment process like this. We do send out questions, we have. And that was kind of incredible and super, like, empowering and exciting. But also just bedding into that sense of, like, it's never finished, and that's okay. And to say that confidently from your chest, that, like, this is permanent, in its broadest sense. To be inclusive, in its broadest sense, is a permanent state of being, of action, of activity, and you can't finish it, and that's okay. And I think it just, there was something about the programme and the voices and the community that allowed me to really go, yeah, I'm down with this and I'm here, and keep going.
Yeah, good.
I think, I mean, it's not a specific, I mean, the obvious one is having Aoife, our amazing fellow, is obviously a highlight, goes without saying, but I think it was just the marked increase in awkward conversations we were having all over the organisation. Like, and some of them weren't great, some of them were amazing, and I think none of that would have happened in that way if we hadn't been part of this process. We were raising things that, there were lots of things that we went into that we did think and fairly sure knew we were doing well, but a lot more were raised that we weren't. Like, and there was things coming, and I left the host meetings, it was never an echo chamber of backslapping. I kind of would leave with Sarah and just be like, oh, right, it's got some work to do now. Like, there's some stuff to do, and I think that was what's really valuable. It wasn't kind of a victory lap at all. It was kind of the realising that you're not even on the podium, like on the starting line for some of this stuff. So.
It was like this as well. It was like sort of a moving process. It was the organisational development was so potent for us, actually, and one of the particularly good things about it was that we had a board member there and a couple of staff members, and so it was sort of cascaded through the organisation. It wasn't just always me, or so our chair was there and one of our managers, and it made us all have those conversations. You know, we used, as being directors, to go into everything and taking this information and trying to pass it on to our team, but it was embedded. So that was really powerful, actually. And the chair really got it. She's been part of the process of doing this. She's fantastic. And it's so great to see this in Welsh. How fantastic was that? Yeah, I think there's, as you say, it's never finished. And there is a feeling about this process that we've been through, that we're still going through it. We've still got the connections. We've still got our groups that we have a lot to do with OCM and Red Note and these part of our cohort we put into during the programme. And we shared all of our recruitment processes with them. We sense checked with them. We've got a bunch of friends now that we can work with.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I said it's energising for us to see that the hosts are embedded in that process as well, and really looking for that longevity. And just touching on a couple of things I said, I don't think I'd be where I am if it wasn't for Jerwood and the structure that brings, because that's where it was for me in terms of recruitment as well. The structure of the way that Jerwood facilitate recruitment was a lot more inclusive for me. Like I said, having that more conversational approach. I mean, here's some questions, what do you think? Rather than certain methods and really abiding by a structure and a language that just isn't me. So yeah, it's good to see that everyone's kind of investing in that process. And I think it is, it does take time. And I think, like you said, not being afraid to go, look, we haven't completed it. We're not a complete product, but come along with us on that journey and come with us. So we've heard the positives. What are some of the barriers that you've faced becoming a host organisation and really embedding that inclusive practice?
COVID was a disaster. Obviously, it was a disaster. But our fellow started. In Wales, we had a sort of longer lockdown period and many more restrictions. And we just couldn't get a room with him. And that was really hard for him and hard for us to embed him. And we're still working with him now, which is fantastic. As a freelancer, he's amazing. He's absolutely brilliant. And we do have a relationship with him. But that was really hard, actually. I've no idea how it was for you, Carl. It was the same period exactly.
Yeah, exactly the same. Like being in Wales as well. Like you said, it was difficult. My year on the placement, I wasn't in the building. Do you know what I mean? I was fortunate to get an extension in the organisation to continue supporting me after that. But yeah, it was challenging not to be able to be in the building and just be practical. And I'm a very practical learner, so yeah, not being able to go in, like you said,
and meet the people and become part of the team.
Yeah.
And be part of those conversations. That was the difficult thing. So yeah, you've carried on for another year, and we've sort of carried on with Kiddos, and we're sort of. That's what I suppose what I mean by it being iterative. It's a continuing process. Hopefully, we've not finished with the Jerwood process now.
We certainly encountered a bit of pushback on Facebook when we advertised the role around the language and the use of low socio-economic, but also became clear that there's a perception of an organisation of the size of the Sculpture Park that it is middle class, or that it's, so even though a lot of the staff are from working class backgrounds or would define as that, as soon as they start working somewhere like the Sculpture Park, the complexity of it all became very apparent. And I think what's brilliant about the toolkit is it acknowledges that. It doesn't try and simplify. It is complicated. Nobody's doing everything right all the time. But the confidence I think we gained from somebody telling us that and other people around us sharing that experience, and it felt like a safety net that we weren't just trying to do things on our own and getting it wrong, and if we did get things wrong or right, we could share it. And there was an absolute generosity as well amongst the fellows and the cohort and the host organisations. It didn't feel competitive, or they're doing that wrong. It felt very much like, oh, have you tried this? Or that's amazing, can I try that? And I think that was really refreshing actually as well.
Thanks. I guess I'd echo the COVID bit of it, and I think I guess bringing intersectionality into the conversation for us is really important, and managing and supporting someone in a care-centred way online is hard, and maybe was a challenge for us organisationally, culturally, as an organisation. I think we would have liked to have done that better, and I think there's lots of learning that we're taking. But there's like a side note to that, I guess, that it's quite personal really, but that person bringing access to work into the organisational space actually meant me as a senior leader went, oh, yeah, that person encouraged me to engage with that process, and now I have support from access to work. And I don't think I would have made that leap, because I would have gone, oh, it's too much to ask of it's too much work for the organisation, it's too much labour, it's too visible, I'm too seen, because I have the privilege of my disability not being visible. But that person brought theirs to the room with confidence and directness that, whilst that brought us challenge, it also did this kind of porous, non-hierarchical, emotional thing that was absolutely transformational for me. So I will always be grateful to them for that. And yeah, I guess like me going on that journey, us as a senior leadership going on that journey, like made me and us all think about how we might improve those things in the future, how we can hold with care, what it means to support someone online, because actually it went way beyond lockdown and COVID for us, and was, about people's well-being and ability to work from home, but also how we successfully support, manage, encourage, care, all of those words sort of mumbled up. And we haven't got the answers, so we'll keep working on that, just like everything else. We're all a work in progress, and that's okay.
Yes, definitely.
I think maybe just a little thing to add, and I didn't experience this personally myself a lot, but I certainly heard it from some of the other host organisations. Not everyone, if you say specifically take part on this programme, or if you're just looking at this subject as a whole, not everyone does get it. They might not really understand why you're trying to make these changes, and they may be quite resistant to that for quite a while. It might not be that you can share the data, you can give the kind of both the moral and the business arguments to why this is something we have to do. They still might not change their opinion. And then, a bit controversial, I think you then have to question whether they're the right person for your organisation. So if that's one of your values, then you need to live by it. And unfortunately, some people don't continue with you on that journey. And I think it's just something to be, not necessarily a barrier, but to be aware of, that it isn't kind of just a pathway to glory. There's some tough conversations on there, and some people might not come on the journey with you all the way.
Got the tea, Daniel?
So, thinking about long journeys, and it's not that, well, we kind of are trying to milk the free career advice a little bit, but what advice would you give to the future Jerwood Fellows now that you've been a part of the programme from a host point of view, and you've specifically supported an individual? If they kind of are stalking the programme and having a look on YouTube and watching this chat, what advice would you give to them from the other side of things now?
To make the most of it, it's going to go really quickly. To build your networks, to not be afraid to ask questions. Don't leave the programme wishing you had made certain statements or asked certain things or asked for particular help or maybe, Okay.
I think that the power is in you. Like, be yourself, bring yourself, back yourself. God, I sound like I'm in reality TV. But which I like very much, so that's okay. But I think, hold tight, be you. You've got a lot to bring. We all, as human beings, have a lot to bring.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I think if you want it, if you need it, ask for it. And I think that the nature of bringing in the fellows is that they are brought in at a certain stratum of the organisation, and that doesn't necessarily feel like it brings with it a lot of authority or a lot of agency. Just really try, I mean, this is a message really here to organisations going through it, but also to the fellows. Try and give those fellows as much agency as you can, because it's positive action. It's a very particular sort of work. It's not normal recruitment. I mean, of course, agency should always be there for everybody, but actually, I think the thing that was said earlier on about being bolshy, I mean, really do just take the bull by the horns. If you have a question, ask it, and that's also down to the organisations to ensure that you are as open and as questioning as an organisation as you can be. But yeah, just be bold, please. Just be bold.
Yeah, I think I just second that really. I think back yourself in there, because the fellows that I've met all have this great energy, this real kind of, what was the word used earlier? Was it bold?
It was bolshiness,
Bolshy, yeah. I need to actually Google that, so I'm 100% sure. I'm guessing it's kind of like, you know, not messing around, not afraid to say the wrong thing, and also there is no wrong thing. I guarantee that if a fellow kind of is thinking about applying and watching this video in however many months' time, the thing that you suggest and that you say at the interview that you're maybe a little bit nervous about is probably the gold. Like, that's probably the thing that no one else on the other side of that Zoom call or table has ever thought of, like, to say it, like, drop it in, because I guarantee it'll be the good bit.
And let's normalise the recruitment process, like, let's mainstream. Oh, either. Camera all right. Let's like, all recruitment processes should, it's a blueprint. You know, like, this is the normal. Recruit thoroughly, with care, well, openly, inclusively.
Fantastic. Thank you all for sharing.
Looking at the fellow, and for future fellows and for fellows who are kind of on that onboarding process, what best practices can you share, examples from having a fellow for professional development and onward progression? Do you have any?
These are tricky questions. Sorry, guys.
We didn't talk about these.
No.
It's coming at us. I got stuck on onboarding.
I'll repeat. So looking at onward progression and professional development, as someone, if they were to come into an organisation as a fellow, or from examples from the fellows you've had, what best practice have you got for that?
I think from the host's point of view is plan, like on day one you get the great email that you've got a fellow coming. Start planning for their legacy, because they're going to be someone you want to keep, like, I can guarantee that. So like, start planning from that point of view, so hopefully if they want to stay with you, you can, and you've resourced that properly. And I think for the fellows themselves, like, in being on the programme, you will become really incredibly networked early on. Like, you will get a great group of people that most people take 10 years to build up, like that phone book of people. So kind of recognise that, because there are going to be so many little offshoots of those people that you meet throughout this programme who are going to be really into what you do, and opportunities will come from there. And I think if you're if it's a kind of very early stage of career which it's targeted at, maybe that feels like the norm, but there's kind of networks that are created as part of this that are really, really powerful and are really hard to tap into otherwise. So yeah, that would be my tip.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just going to pull us back to something that we kind of touched on earlier, is governance and trustees. Talk me through your kind of process, or maybe your thoughts surrounding the importance of having a board that's on board with inclusivity.
I mean, it does have to permeate every level of the organisation, and level makes it sound hierarchical. It should be more circular, I suppose. But yes, and it is, you know, we benefit from a board who bring a lot of experience and expertise around inclusion, and but also, you know, working with our fellow. And it's every conversation is leading to a greater whole, and it has led us to do a lot of values work with People Make It Work, and that has recently kind of become much more embedded. And so yeah, it has to be, I think the takeaway is it shouldn't need additional resource in the sense that it should be part of all of your budgets and all of your planning and all of your projects and all of your activity. It shouldn't just be like a separate budget pot and a separate activity. It should weave through everything, and that's the people that you work with at every part of the organisation as well.
I think that's a really good point. I think it struck me when Lily was talking earlier on about being someone's ancestor. And so having that zooming out, our board is really good at doing that, zooming out and taking that long view. In Wales, we're fortunate enough to have the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which is enshrined in law, which is amazing, which is all about being that ancestor, being a really responsible ancestor. So I think that thing of exactly thinking of legacy, thinking of the bigger picture while you're doing this work. And we have a lot of trustees at TCAS because we have a really very, very broad remit, and we feel like we need as many people as we can get with really great experience. And they do just all bring their own experience, which is just invaluable.
Thank you. You got.
I guess it's like making sure that your trustees are living your values, and if they're not, then why are they there? If your trustees are on board with care-centred, people-centred practice, then they will embrace this, and that was our experience, I think, of our trustees. I think there's something about scale of organisation that's in the back of my head itching away, and how, whilst I've talked about scrabbling around and struggling, there's also a huge benefit of being an organisation of 5. It means that we were majority, working class, whatever terminology you want to put in, and remain that actually. And conversations are impacted by that, I think. I wonder what that means when you scale up and it's much harder and less visible. Like, it's super visible in our team to know, and we're in a position that we create a space that means that we can be very transparent, but maybe that's the next thing to work out. Like, for me personally, like, how do you do that in an organisation of like 100 people? Do you hold that space? But yeah, I guess the trustees for us have to be of that energy, of that one, living our values.
Do you know, that reminds me of a conversation we had last week in the meeting about readiness of organisation. And obviously a local authority doesn't have trustees and has a completely different governance system. And we were saying that it's probably really, really difficult for a local authority to be ready for this sort of work. And so there's probably a need for, as there was in RCT, a brave department to say this is what we're here for, and to sort of lead that forward. So we had that conversation about readiness being really important because of not exposing the fellow, but also a need for bravery on the other hand, a need for driving work forward, which otherwise, in a local authority, for example, isn't going to happen. Just reminded me of that.
Yeah, I think that's really important because, like I said, different scale of organisation and different structure of organisation will depend on how fast change can happen, and in that scaling up process as well, how quickly you can adapt and be adaptable and responsive to what is actually going on. And I think it is difficult, like, from a local authority point of view, because your whole senior management of the arts service can be on board, but if the council ain't on board, you're, my language, fucked, like, do you know what I mean? So, yeah, I think it's difficult.
I feel like we're talking around the edges of the benefit of vulnerability and being able to be vulnerable, and I think that's a lot harder when you get into government structures and what that means, because part of being successful in this work is being vulnerable, organisationally vulnerable, to critiquing yourself, to receiving critiques from other people, but like in a constructive way. And how do you do that as a local authority?
And I think we discussed as well on the call, like, how do we build a space that all the responsibility isn't on the person with lived experience or on the fellow. I don't know if any of you want to bring kind of your thoughts on that forward, like, how as host organisations you built a structure that it wasn't like Okay, we've got a person with lived experience, we've got a really difficult conversation. Do you know what I mean? How did you build, how did you build that structure?
I mean, what shone through the toolkit and the conversations is empathy, and I think that is something that is so valuable in the world generally, but you know, as somebody who can't now claim to be working class, it felt that it legitimised my allyship to say that I could have empathy for that person, and I think, you know, that's the key, I think.
I think sometimes it's really useful to try and bring in external voices in those conversations so that it doesn't feel like you say, we've got a fellow now, so now we want to talk about what it's like, our organisational culture is like. I think so. We found that very useful, but to keep those things kind of deliberately separate. Like, we were on a programme as host organisations, and we were at a different stage as to where our fellow was and their programme, and that was kind of easy for us. And obviously that conversation kind of moved back and forth, but then there were also really important bits that didn't kind of go back and forth. Aoife's kind of learning on that. On the fellow side of it, sometimes it was very important for it to be personal to her, and then there was things that we were untangling on the host programme that maybe weren't kind of great to have instantly exposed and in front, because we weren't ready for that, and we had to figure out the correct kind of way. So yeah, I think it's really important that those sometimes don't actually operate as the same thing, and they're two kind of pieces of work.
The outside voices point is a really interesting one. Our fellow, in his interview, said that he felt passionate about the creatives within his community never being supported by any subsidy or fund or arts councils. And we were in Wales doing a piece of cultural contract work. And so he asked if he could go into his community and speak to Somali creatives and fashion designers and musicians in the Cardiff in Butte Town area. And so he led that conversation. So he became the sort of, rather than having the weight of all of that experience on his own shoulders, he went into the community and brought back sort of evidence, which was really lovely because it was what he wanted to do and enabled us to learn through his work. It was a really interesting experience.
Thank you. I think we're going to open up the floor now to questions from the audience. Conscious of time, we've possibly got time, let's say, for two or three. Yeah. So if you would like to ask any of these lovely hosts a question, pop your hand up and we'll bring you a microphone. Anyone with a burning question? Or we can keep going because I've got lots to ask.
No burning questions?
I think it's a big topic, isn't it? And I think I've been banging on about this for years now, but even with these conversations, I often find it quite hard to think of the words to try and say, because it's such a big issue when we're one person, and yeah, it's a tricky thing. Okay, so we've got a couple of minutes left. I think we should end on a good note. So let's, thinking about the sector, maybe if we jump forward 10 years' time, what are some of the things that you'd hope to see for the up-and-coming emerging leaders and managers?
I mean, I think when Lily mentioned that there's a couple of other reports coming out, it does feel like there's a groundswell of conversation. So on Friday, I was at the opening of Emma Hart and Dean Kenning's exhibition at Fruit Market Gallery, which is very much looking at class and culture and access and pathways and opportunity. And if you haven't seen it, definitely do see it. There's the Working Class Creatives Database, who is self-organising, sharing opportunities and solidarity. And, you know, I think for me, today has just felt really hopeful in the sense that a lot of things right now feel quite broken, but this feels really optimistic. And so thank you to everybody.
I would hope that we've kind of put a lot of the weight on the fellows today, but also there's a large group of people on the host programme who should also be, I mean, I'm not planning on retiring anytime soon, would be lovely. But, so we're going to go on and be working for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years until it's possible to retire. And we're going to be going on and taking our learning as well. So I hope that as well as that being a kind of groundswell of activity, that there's some people who are already in positions of power and leadership who are making that change from where they go on to into their careers as well. So there's now 51 host organisations and the teams that they worked with who are taking that learning wherever they end up as well. So I'm hoping that they're driving change as well.
I don't have anything at all inspirational to say. Although, I think, I hope I'm going to be retired in about 10 years, to be quite frank, but I think that certainly when I came into the sector, and all the time I've been working in the arts, which is a long time, there's been age has been a barrier, and I hope that some amazing younger leaders like yourselves will gain traction and be leading organisations, and absolutely older people as well, people of all ages. I think there's been this, I worked in the BBC back in 1990, and there was this, if you stayed there long enough, hold on for dear life and you'll get a senior position. That's probably a little bit unfair now, but I think there really feels like there's such a wonderful energy about this cohort of fellows, for example. I just want to see you in positions of leadership because I think it'd be brilliant. And I hope that things like age and class and gender and all of these things become less of a barrier, because they obviously have been for such a long time.
Thank you. Final thoughts? For the big question? I know, I'm so sorry. I did chuck that out there.
I think there's some things sort of bubbling around my head around resource, and the power that brings for everybody. Aaron and I met on a leadership course called Represent. It's one of the very few leadership courses I've ever done. Shout out to them. And they brought in this academic quite early in the course that spoke about inclusivity and diversity in its broadest sense. A range of voices would automatically, essentially, and it's really logical, mean if you have more voices from different experiences in your organisation, you will more successfully reach different people with different experiences in the world. And that is something that businesses are starting to get on board with and understand, like in corporate organisations and blue chip companies and things, and that in the arts sector we can get on board with that if we reflect the broadest range of communities internally, then we will successfully, through dialogue and discussion internally, make work, create hopefully fucking brilliant art that then can reach the broadest range. And like some of those words feel already like kind of buzzword catch terms, but like if you mean it authentically and you do it authentically, then that's great. And that's successful. But you cannot do that without true resource. Like it costs money, and true access, true inclusivity is not cheap. And so, I think I'd love in 10 years to see that inclusive leadership truly resourced.
Thank you very much. Thanks for those from the host organisations who joined us. Thanks Deborah and Hilary who joined us earlier. And thanks to the live audience and those on live stream that joined us. Quotes and suggestions and recommendations from those with lived experiences can be found in the toolkit. We have many copies outside in both English and Welsh with a QR code on the back for accessible versions and digital versions. Those on the live stream, I believe the link is in the YouTube description, so please take a look at the PDF. And if anyone in Wales wants one in Welsh or English, chuck me a message, I'll bring one down.
Thank you.
Hopefully you can't hear my heartbeat through this, but so I'm Louis. I'm a early 30s white male with short brown hair and glasses. Yeah, we just want to talk a little bit about the workshop program that we've been putting together. So the 6 of us that you've heard from today, the 6 Toolkit Associates, have been working together with Claire and Melissa over the last few weeks to co-create an interactive, informative and inclusive workshop program based around the themes of the toolkit. When we got together for the first time, I think it was in January, and then again last month, we obviously had a lot of ideas. And we've tried to distill them so that all of our contributions are present in some form. We're essentially all presenting and representing each other's work. That's the people that were in the room and then the people whose quotes are in the toolkit. So in keeping with this, we want the workshops to really focus around the quotes. And those of you who are staying for the workshop, you'll see this. The target audience for the workshops and the toolkit in general is employers, decision makers in the arts and cultural organisations of all disciplines, all disciplines and sizes across the country. And hopefully this will include previous and or future hosts of the bursary programme. There will be 6 initial workshops, there's 3 in person across the country and 3 online to increase reach and accessibility. They'll be delivered by us, the Toolkit Associates, between April and June this year. There'll be a slightly shorter workshop just after this launch event, led by us 2. To take part in the workshops, there'll be a minimum donation based on a sliding scale. There'll be a number of subsidised places available, and you can visit the Jerwood Arts website for more information to book your place.
I'm Jodie. I'm a white woman of medium build with short, light brown hair, and I'm wearing a golden, blue and black jacket. So here's some more information about the workshops. The workshops will give organisations and individuals who take part the opportunity to deepen their understanding of socio-economic inclusivity. It will allow you to work through examples and share ideas on approaches to inclusivity. You'll be able to consider how the ideas in the toolkit could apply to your organisation, and you can meet with other organisations within a community of learning and accountability. So after these 6 workshops, there will be more to follow, subject to demand, but hopefully lots, because they're going to be great and we want to make lots of positive change. And so from my personal experience of reading the toolkit, I just felt such a huge amount of relief when I read it before we came to plan these workshops. And I just had such hope and confidence, and I was like walking down the street on the way to our workshop like I was in my own music video with the wind in my hair and my backing dancers, and I'm just, that confidence, it gives me confidence, and I'm really excited about, whatever that version of is for the, younger people coming after me of giving them that same energy, so.
I guess when I read it, it was a bit surreal, like, so much of it felt familiar to my own experiences. So, like, there are bits in there that I know are my own quotes, and there are other bits I'm like, did I say that, or is that someone else's? It's so familiar, so I've lost the word, but like just knowing that other people feel more or less exactly the same. And there are people that have disagreed with some of my quotes as well, but that's also important and valid to see that, because it just reaffirms that there isn't a one-size-fits-all.
So we invite those of you who are joining for the workshop to prepare yourself to listen, learn and be challenged. And everyone else, please share the toolkit with your colleagues and help spread the word about the workshops. And we'll hopefully see you there at one of the workshops. They're going live today, so you can go to the Jerwood website and book your place at an in-person workshop at Theatre Royal Plymouth, Derby Theatre or the British Library, and then there's also 3 online. So go and book your place and hopefully see you there. Thanks.
Thank you both so much. That was a brilliant introduction to the workshops. So we come to the end of this whirlwind morning, and I'm joined by John.
This side.
Yeah, this side. And there are just some very important thank yous before we wind up the event. A huge thank you to all of our audiences, online and here in the space. Thank you for carving out the time and for prioritising this event, for your work on inclusion. To all of you, please consider yourself now part of the movement, if you weren't already. The baton is being passed today. I think what we've learnt today is open the door and keep it open. Have awkward conversations and embrace the bullshiness. We're all advocates. Talk about what you're doing, tackle policymakers, share. And this is a but and an and. This is a very live process. None of us know everything, and we're all learning as we go along. It's never done, it's all progress. That's what I've learned from today. A huge debt of gratitude to our 6 Toolkit Associates. I'm very glad you've all met them today, behind the scenes and on the stage. The Toolkit wouldn't be possible without them. So really delighted that you've been here. And to everyone who's been part of making today happen behind the scenes with the Sadler's Wells teams, Blue Wing Media for live streaming, I'm hoping that's going well. I haven't heard otherwise. And to Haider for his wonderful photography today. I seem to come back again to the Toolkit Associates. They're last on my list of people to thank.
Seems appropriate.
It does, doesn't it? So thank you, and I'm going to hand on to John to do the rest of the thank yous.
So on behalf of Lily, I'd also like to share some more thank yous. I'm John Opie, I'm Deputy Director of Jerwood Arts. I'm a white man in his 40s, wearing a purple jumper, spectacles. Who says spectacles anymore? So, as you can tell by the number of people involved in today, it's been a massive effort to get the Toolkit to this moment, the programme as a whole. I'd like to say a big thank you to the extended Toolkit team, led by Melissa Wong, which included the steering group, Claire Thurman and her colleagues at People Make It Work, our brilliant designers, Take Courage, and our website guru, Tim Dukes, and of course, my wonderful colleagues, the Jerwood Arts team. Thanks also to those who help us make it as accessible as possible. The Welsh translators, the Easy Read creators, audio recorders, and user testers. I'd like to thank again all the programme's funders, Arts Council England, Garfield Weston Foundation, Art Fund, Arts Council Wales, Creative Scotland, British Council, Jerwood Arts, and PRS Foundation. And a thanks to our wider programme partners, including Arts Emergency, Dave O'Brien, and our evaluator, Anne Bell Jackson Associates. I've got one extra special thank you to make, which is to Kate. Kate co-founded, as you heard, and has led 4 editions of the Weston Jerwood Creative Bursaries. She has let us know recently that very sadly this is going to be her last one before she moves on to other very exciting and special ventures. Kate, I know you wouldn't want a big fuss made. I'm very sorry, but we have to do this. But we know how many people in this room and on live stream wouldn't want to miss this chance to say a very big thank you for everything you've done. It's not overstating it to say that over 13 years you have led the programme and it has made a powerful impact on people's lives.
not least the 150 plus fellows that have taken their first steps in their arts careers. So thank you, Kate, for being a brilliant campaigner for a fairer and more inclusive arts sector. You can be very proud of what you've achieved with the programme. We'll miss you as a colleague, and we wish you all the very best for your next project. Everyone, please put your hands together for Kate. So, I think you're all ready to stretch your legs and get out to this auditorium. For those staying here at Sadler's Wells, there's more teas, coffees and pastries outside. Please take part. And if you don't have a place on the workshop this afternoon, do sign up for future ones on Jerwood Arts website and spread word about them to friends, colleagues, etc. Thank you again for joining us today. We look forward to hearing your feedback on Toolkit.